Serenbe is a place where people live, work, learn, and play in celebration of life's beauty. And we're here to share the stories that connect residents and guests to each other and to nature. This is Serenbe Stories. When Dennis Creech started Southface, energy wasn't even a part of the environmental conversation, yet he knew it would be one of the most significant issues our society would face. And in this episode today, he talks about the positive effects of green building and how Atlanta is leading the nation in reducing energy and water demand. Dennis also tells us about the Kendeda Building for Innovative, Sustainable Design on Georgia Tech's campus and how it's changing the global conversation on how we build, conservation, and how we can lower energy demand. But first, Serenbe Stories is brought to you by The Inn at Serenbe. The Inn is nestled in the rolling countryside of bucolic Serenbe, where guests can walk on the 15 miles of trails through preserved forest land, the wildflower meadow, and the animal village. You can relax by the pool, hot tub, or in rocking chairs on the wraparound porch. Play on the croquet lawn, swings, and in-ground trampolines. Connect with nature and each other, all while staying in luxurious rooms on the Inn grounds or within the community of Serenbe. Book your stay today at serenbeinn.com. I want to welcome Steve back.
Thanks, Monica.
As well as our guest today, which is Dennis Creech.
Hi, Monica.
Dennis, who we're going to be talking to today, has been the co-founder and the previous executive director of Southface for over 38 years from its inception, as well as a national leader in sustainability, a winner of awards too numerous for me to list. He was designated by the Georgia Trend as one of the 100 most influential Georgians and is currently a sustainability fund advisor for the Kendeda Fund since 2017. So welcome.
Welcome, Dennis.
Yeah, well, it's always a great pleasure to be at Serenbe. Just the vibe here is just terrific.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that.
Thank you. And you have seen it since the very beginning when this was just a forest and dirt.
You know, and it's still a forest and dirt, which is, right. I think that speaks to what Serenbe is about.
That's right.
Or soil, we should say.
That's true.
It's a forest with healthy soil.
That's great. Well, and that is a perfect segue into what question I ask everybody in the beginning is, how did you and Steve Nygren originally meet? Way back when?
I can't tell you the exact time because, you know, you hear about people and you're moving in circles and then suddenly, you know, you're together and you know, Steve is the ultimate networker. And so, you know, I know I knew him before I knew him because so many people were talking about what his vision was.
And so you see, I more specifically remember, while maybe I ran into Dennis Creech at various things, but we had stepped off the treadmill. And so we were just out here in the country doing our thing. And then when we realized that we were trying to save this area, and everyone's heard the Ray Anderson story, Ray, I believe, pointed me to Southface, to Dennis, and to Greenprints. And if you look back into those early years, and this is like 2000, 2001, Greenprints was one of the few places in the nation where you could really find the information and the speakers. What year did Greenprints start, Dennis?
Well, you're going to ask me to remember a date I don't remember exactly. It's about 30 years ago.
Yeah. And so I started showing up, and I remember everyone was very curious because we weren't showing up at a lot in Atlanta at that point. And why was I at this meeting, you know, in environmentalists and development and the built environment? And of course, at this point, we didn't even know what we were going to do and certainly weren't talking about it. So that's probably how I was sneaking in there on Dennis's side views.
Well, I mean, I do remember the fact that it was a rare developer that was interested in something more than just a planned community approach. And so someone who understood the importance of the holistic approach to green. You know, we were having some green building success at that time, but it was, you know, people doing onesies and twosies kind of thing largely. And so to have someone that had a vision for not just the house, but the entire community was rare and special.
And so when the Rocky Mountain Institute and Ray Anderson convened the 23 thought leaders in September of 2000, Dennis was one of those thought leaders who joined us at that very first discussion on environmental issues and how it might apply towards the built environment. And this was at the point we were still just trying to figure out how to save the greater area. And Ray was nudging me towards actually becoming a developer.
And I'm from the South. I'm a proud Southerner. But it was very rare to have that kind of vision in the South. I mean, you would think of people in the Pacific Northwest or in Boulder or, some great places that were magnets for creative thinking for sure. But to have that here in Georgia in the Southeast, I think makes it extra special.
Well, and that's actually an interesting point you make because Southface, you could say the same thing about Southface that had started, let's say, 20 years prior to the idea of even Serenbe. So how did that come about, and why Southface? Why did you feel? First of all, tell us what that was or is, and then tell us why you wanted to build that.
Well, Southface started roughly about 1978. Just as Serenbe started, really, when did you first start thinking about this? It's not one day. It just is it evolves over time. But that's a long time ago. In 1978, the environmental movement was still fairly new. Earth Day had started. But if you polled the issues that most environmental organizations were working on, it was things like recycling and keeping rivers from catching on fire and important work. But energy was not really considered an environmental issue back then. But if you look at it, the production and use of energy is some would say the most significant, certainly one of the most significant environmental challenges our society faces. And that's really where Southface started, was looking at how do we fill that gap in the environmental movement about not looking at energy and its impact. And then it evolved from there, because you can't just look at energy. You've got to look at water. And you can't just look at energy and water. You've got to look at health.
Yep.
And you can't just look at energy, water, and health. You've got to look at the natural resources that are feeding this. And the impact of the built environment on the natural environment, again, was just not something that was talked about a lot, especially in the South. And so that's really the catalyst that formed Southface.
And were you doing work in that area prior to that? I know you had gotten your master's in, I think it was systems ecology.
Yeah, I'm a fallen systems ecologist, if you will.
Fallen.
And so we started as an all-volunteer organization.
Okay.
I was the co-chair of that effort, but it became apparent that this was sort of, in my mind, applied ecology.
Okay.
And the group of us that started Southface, that's what we were interested in.
Right. And Steve, had you heard about it prior when you were up in Atlanta and doing things, or was it sort of you were in parallel universes at that point?
Aware maybe, but not really interested. I was the hospitality guy, and what year did you do the office there on Renaissance?
96.
96.
When the Olympics came to town, we were successful in building a new demonstration facility to take advantage of the world's attention on Atlanta, to showcase that there were better ways of designing and building where we live and work and play. So.
And was Energy Star, when did that happen? Because I think of that as like an early...
The Southface office that we built in 96 was the first Energy Star certified building in the South.
Okay, perfect. That's good.
Yeah.
And because I think most consumers, growing up, that's something that you see on a light bulb or an appliance. And so that was sort of maybe a lot of our early entree as just a general public into energy savings or reducing the energy. But what other things, why did it lead to a certification? Because you do have a certification for homes and businesses and workplaces called the Earthcraft certification. How did that come out of Southface?
Well, there's that old saying, trust but verify.
Okay.
And so, I've worked with many home builders over my career, and every builder builds a quality home. And so, but that obviously in the marketplace doesn't have a lot of power. And so we had design and construction professionals who were serious about lessening the impact of, what they designed and built on the environment. And there needed to be a way to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. And we actually did focus groups and partnering with the Home Builders Association, and found that consumers would link independent certification program around green building with quality. And so in their mind, that was something that they responded to. And the data was pretty compelling, really. And so a few enlightened developers and builders saw that. And frankly, it fit with their own personal values.
What year did you launch the Earthcraft certification for homes?
Again, it was a long incubation period. Steve, I'm embarrassed. I can't remember the exact year, but I do remember the first year. And again, we did this in partnership with the Home Builders Association. The first year, we had 8 houses in the program.
Oh, wow!
And they've certified over 50,000 today.
That is incredible.
And because no one knew if this was going to catch on. I mean,
that's right.
This was a risk.
And you were as I remember, one of the early certification programs in the United States, and you preceded LEED certification by several years.
Yeah, in fact, we served on the committee. I personally served on the committee to help develop the LEED residential program.
Oh, that's impressive.
Because I think the market is a great force, and so, but there's not one tool out there. And really, green building is very much a local thing. What you do here at Serenbe is not the same formula that you would take if you were building in Minneapolis. And so having a regional approach, I think, is a smart way to go, because you can tap the attributes of that local climate, the local building styles, the local talent, and that's what leads to success.
Right, and Southface is sort of the southeastern regional option for people.
But the amazing thing, and I think Dennis is being modest, because we're looking back here in the 90s, 80s, and there were not many voices, especially in the South. And Dennis was that voice that stood out in this entire movement, pushing leaders and people to say there is a different way and to look at that. And it's really important. And I think the certification is one of those. It was an early program. And today, I continue to think it's the best program, because of the inspection program. And so as a developer, as an owner of a building, I have real confidence that when I have an Earthcraft certification, I have a performing building. And with many of the certification programs, that's not necessarily true. It might be certified plans, and we don't always know if it's built that way.
We have a saying, it's important to have someone with mud on their boots out there working in the program. I mean, you've got to be on the job site to check. And the reality is, the builders that are working in the program, it's not that they're trying to cheat the program or whatever. There's a lot of moving parts on a job site.
Sure.
And I remember personally, being out on a job site some number of years back, and checking the heating and cooling equipment. And the builder had taken the credit in the program for putting in a high efficiency heating and cooling system. A good thing to do. But you're looking at the product itself and looking at the numbers on the piece of equipment, and they don't match up. And you say, oh, gee, this is not the efficient unit that you said you were taking. You call the builder and he says, what do you mean? I'm paying for it. And so something had happened in the subcontractor's warehouse where the wrong piece of equipment had gotten onto the truck.
Of course.
And so things like that happen.
That's right.
And so this extra quality assurance aspect, I think, of a good green building program adds a lot of value. And we just had hundreds of examples of where that is. Another set of eyes out there helping ensure that you're getting what you're paying for, and that you're going to get the performance.
That's interesting to think about if you live somewhere else and you're either working with a certification program like Earthcraft, to ask that question, that some of them, I didn't realize that some of them didn't verify, if you will, or didn't have the boots on the ground in the mud.
Right.
That's a great question to ask.
Yeah, again, just lots of stories of that's the case. And so it's not this I got you kind of a program at all.
Not.
It's really a partnership where you are working with the subcontractors, you're working with the builder. One of the nicest compliments early in the program we got was we'd been out there and the installation of the forced air heating and cooling ductwork is one of the most critical things about ensuring comfort and health in a house, and also low energy bills. And it hadn't been done correctly. And talking with the subcontractor who'd done the work, said, "Oh, you didn't tell me this was an Earthcraft house." And I'm going.
They're like, well, shouldn't you just be building it that way anyway?
and I don't mean, because there are so many good contractors in the program. And that was in the early days. And today now, and one of the things I'm proud of, and I think Serenbe deserves credit for this as well, is we've changed the industry.
That's right.
And so this is not just those one-off kinds of programs. I mean, we've raised the tide on all the boats. Now, Serenbe still floats high on the water for sure, for many reasons. But all construction has been improved because of the green building programs around the country, and I think Earthcraft has done a good job in the South.
And Dennis, while you've worked with developers, also there are cities now that are requiring Earthcraft certification. Is that?
That's true. Here in Georgia, the city of Decatur.
Oh.
And so, because Decatur is a city that recognizes that air quality is important, that recognizes that saving water is important to the municipalities. I mean, having to build it, and it's an economic argument.
Sure.
Having to build more infrastructure to support sewage systems and water supply systems is very costly for local governments. And so, why put in those kinds of systems and buildings that are inefficient, that waste? And so that's going to add to the taxpayer burden down the road of having to build new infrastructure.
Right. So when we talk about cities being Earthcraft certified, and I know that Serenbe is one of the first Earthcraft certified communities. So you've got a house, you can certify a house, you can certify a workplace, a commercial building. Serenbe, I believe, the way that we're certified is it's every single home and every single building is in it. I don't know if there's other layers.
Well, there are several layers.
Okay.
We were part of that test communities. They chose different communities so that there was that first group. We all represented different things. We were sort of the green field, and I was worried that we would really be low on the totem pole, and we came out pretty high because of our environmental issues.
As a matter of fact, of those early 4 pilot communities, I think few thought of Serenbe as, because they were sort of the small one at the beginning, but they are anything but that now. They have succeeded beyond, I think, everyone's expectations, except for maybe Steve. I think Steve's vision was there right from the start.
Yes. He's way ahead of both of us.
For sure.
But so that's interesting for the community, but for a city, how does that work? Is it the same model where it's every home, every commercial, or is it every future, or is there infrastructure? What's involved in that?
So the city actually does this, they can customize it the way they want. With the city of Decatur, that we were using as an example, they've passed an ordinance that requires, if you're building a new home, it has to meet a certain green building certification.
Oh, interesting.
And so I believe that's now linked with their certificate of occupancy. They have to show their Earthcraft certification.
Right.
Okay. And I think that's how it is here, right? As well. I know that I have like an Earthcraft sign in my, laundry room with the numbers on it and whatever they mean. But that made me happy when I moved in.
That's right. And what I believe we're starting to show is that has value. So when buyers, especially the younger generation, that means something when they see that certification, because that tells them.
So a true story, a person who was a developer friend, his housekeeper came in one day, and he was wearing an Earthcraft T-shirt. And she says, oh, Earthcraft. And he says, oh, you know the Earthcraft program? She says, yeah, I live in one of the homes. Earthcraft certifies apartments as well as single-family homes. And she lived in one of the Earthcraft certified apartments. And he said, oh, what do you know about Earthcraft? She said, oh, not much other than I know I got a better house.
Oh, that's great. There you go. You just won on the brand.
Right. And so I think, many, Earthcraft homeowners or renters of apartments, they don't really know the details of the program, but they know they've got better comfort. They know maybe their kids have fewer respiratory issues. They know their energy and water bills are less. And so they don't really understand perhaps green building, but they know the benefits that a program offers.
Well, you bring a good point, because as you said, it started out with, energy, and then you can't deal with that other than water, and then that leads to various things. And what we found, why we really focused on the energy or the environmental, now we're into our 15th year of people living here, and it's the health results that we hear a lot about. And how much was that part of what you were doing? I know your friendship with Howie Frumkin pulled you into that, but how much was that actually part of the program or just an awareness?
Oh, I think it was critical from the start for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's the right thing to do. And, you always want to be trying to make the world a better place, I think. Second, that connects with potential homeowners or renters in many ways more than the dollar savings, because who doesn't want their kids to live in a house that's going to be helping them with their health as opposed to contributing to problems with health. And if you look at it on a monetary basis, if you can keep a kid from having to go to the emergency room to deal with asthma or to their doctor, that saves more money than the savings on the energy and the water bill. And so, and Atlanta, where we're based here, is no different than every other major city in this country. We have an epic of asthma in our city. And we know the built environment helps contribute to that. And so when we do green building well, we have a healthier home. We reduce asthma triggers. And there's data that shows that happens with well-designed and constructed green products. Again, if we could monetize that savings, it would be much greater than the savings we get from energy and water efficiency.
Were you making those links back in the 80s and 90s?
We were beginning to. We didn't have the data that we have now. In fact, I mentioned that there were 8 houses that were built the first year of the Earthcraft program. What made me the proudest of that, one of the 8 houses, one of the first owners of an Earthcraft home had a kid named Drew, young boy, about 10, and he had asthma. And so the mom tells the story. She took Drew to see her pulmonary doctor, and he said, "This is the best I've seen Drew in years. What are you doing?" And the answer was, "We moved into an Earthcraft home." Now, we don't have data that proves that. That was just one incident. But we heard those kinds of stories throughout, and continue to hear that throughout the program. And now the research is backing up with good data that when we do green design well, and so it has positive health benefits.
And it's now documented that there are huge savings in building well on your energy costs, and that's why every Fortune 500 company requires a certified building now. How do you see us monetizing the health benefits for the future?
We're beginning to see some progress in that area where healthcare companies recognize, if we can eliminate these problems that lead to poor health in the built environment, in homes, schools, then that's going to save them downstream on healthcare costs. It's hundreds of dollars for a kid to go to the emergency room for an asthma treatment. And so if we can reduce asthma triggers in the home, that's saving the healthcare companies. The trouble is, there's no free lunches out there. And so it costs a little bit to design and build to a higher standard. And you get the savings in energy savings, and you get the savings in health, which I think are much greater than the energy and water savings. But the challenge is what's known as the split incentive. The person who makes the decisions on how buildings are designed and constructed are not the same people who benefit from the lower energy and water and other operating costs or benefit from the health savings. And so in most residential design and construction, people build houses and they sell them and they say, have a nice life.
Right. That's
what makes Serenbe, I think, a little bit different is you've got this sense of community here, and it speaks to your values, but it speaks to the values of the community. Is we're not just about cheap and quick. We're about looking at long-term, how buildings perform, how people are enhanced, their health and their wallet by doing the right thing on the design, and then how that enhances community. Mm-hmm. And so the green part is an important part of Serenbe, but you also enhance people with the arts and exposure to good food and nutrition. And so there's a lot of way that you're building community here. I would say all that's sustainable.
Well, and so it's the market that has driven the appetite, I would suggest, for certified houses. Is that correct? It's not necessarily. In the early days, it was willing builders and possibly developers, but now I think it's the market pushing it. That's why there's such an increase.
Steve, yes and no. I think the market is there, but the majority of homes still are not certified green that are built out there. The majority of commercial buildings are still not certified. We're making good, we've made progress in market penetration, if you will. So, I'm going to bring this back to Serenbe. I think this is why having visionary people who work hard, who are stubborn, and say, this is the way, we're going to do it the right way. And sometimes you have to wait for some of the market forces to come to where you are.
It's just amazing that people are still willing to pay their local utilities this money every month when they don't have to. And of course, I think it's also how we talk about it. I've talked to many of our companies that supply the product, and they talk about the payback, and they're always showing the savings and how it spreads out. But you're very well aware of the house we did in partnership with Bosch. And it was an Earthcraft certified house, which reduced, 35% of the energy demand. Right. Then we required geothermal. And that was another 35%. And then they put solar on it. Well, they were able to put 1/3 the solar on that house because we'd already reduced the demand by that 70%. Now, it was more expensive, of course, to build. And so when we sold it, they got a mortgage. And their monthly mortgage payment was, of course, more because it cost more. But their increase in their monthly mortgage was less than what their power bill would have been. And so it's cash positive month one.
Right.
So rather than talking about payback, let's talk about cash flow. And that's, I think, how we can maybe have the conversation differently. And when you look at it that way, why wouldn't someone? And then you add the health piece on it, it becomes a no-brainer. And how as an industry do we educate?
Well, you're right. When it's done well, houses are usually the biggest investment most people make in their lives, single investment. And so, you're investing when you increase the cost, modest increase in cost for energy and water efficiency and the health benefits. That's an investment you're making that offers paybacks. The houses are going to last 50 to 100 years. And so as opposed to when you pay a utility bill, that's not an investment. That's just a cost. And so it gets back to that split incentive that, people are not involved early in the design and construction process. And most people who are making those decisions, they don't see the direct benefits. And so unfortunately, a lot of folks still they buy homes based on emotion more than they do on logic. Location to schools is important. Color of walls and what kind of kitchen countertop you have. Those are all important decisions. Nobody wants, ugly countertops for sure. But, it takes a knowledgeable consumer. For the market to work sometime. Again, which gets back to, Serenbe doesn't take the easy route on this. You take a route that I think is values driven, and that speaks highly to what y'all are doing here. And, the economics, you understand them, but it's not the short, quick-term economics. It's the economics that play out over time.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
And if we can start monetizing the real benefits of health and environmental health as well, we are concerned about climate change. And we still allow buildings to be built that needlessly waste energy. And we need to get around on public policy that prevents that from happening. And so,
well, currently you're leading the way now with your role at Kendeda and the new building that you've just unveiled. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're pretty pleased. We have a partnership with Georgia Tech, and Kendeda is a private donor-driven foundation, and we've partnered with Georgia Tech to build what's known as a living building. And it's a building that produces more energy than it uses. We say that's net positive for energy, produces more than it uses. It's also net positive for water. And what that means is all the water the building uses for irrigation, for potable drinking water, everything is water that we capture on site from the rooftop, rainwater, and store that. And so we're net positive for water. A little unusual aspect of the building, it's also net positive for waste. And what that means is that we've recycled, about 98% of the construction waste was recycled. Well, how do you get from 98% to over 100%? So we've used a lot of reclaimed, salvaged materials. And so the inside of the building is just beautiful because trees that had fallen from storm damage or from disease on the site were remilled and used in the building. The wood's gorgeous. We took wood that had been thrown away from movie sets.
Wow.
Over 20,000 2x4s. And reuse those in the construction of the building. So that's how you get net positive for waste. But the most important thing is the building is healthy.
Yeah.
It's got great daylighting design. It's got biophilic design aspects in it. The building has not even officially opened, and yet it is filled with people because they just are. It's a magnet. People are just drawn to the space.
And so our listeners can just drop by and walk in. Is that correct?
Yes, it's on Georgia Tech's campus. It's a public university, so it's open to the public. Obviously, university buildings have hours of operation, so it's always a good idea to go to the website and check. And so you can go to the Kendeda website, by the way, and see a live action view of the building. It's really it's a handsome building. And so there's never been a perfect building. I don't want to oversell this, but this is a really good building. When you're net positive for energy and water and waste, and there's some equity issues around the building, Kendeda believes strongly in equity. So, for example, when you walk in the building, one of the first things you notice is this beautiful salvaged wood ramp that leads you down the building as it steps down and follows the slope of the site there. And everyone, the immediate reaction is, that is the most gorgeous, stairwell I've ever seen. No one says, oh, that's designed for someone in a wheelchair.
Right.
They just see the beauty of the materials and the design. And so that gets to be an equity. A lot of times in buildings, if you need a ramp for mobility issues, the ramp is hidden back in the storage area. And it takes you a hard time to find it. This is front and center. And adds beauty to the space as well as functionality for people who have mobility issues.
Yeah, we were both there you've been there multiple times,
right.
But I got a chance to go recently. It was stunning.
Mm-hmm.
And Dennis, you brought up the point of perceptions of the South, and many people are surprised that Atlanta is really a leader in many of these issues. I mean, with this building and many certified buildings. And can you share some of those statistics or some of that?
Well, first of all, when you say Atlanta, it's the people in Atlanta that are the leaders, and so. Again, it's the Steve Nygrens, it's the Ray Andersons, it's a lot of other folks who've provided leadership, both in terms of in government, but very importantly in the business community. And I would also, put the civic institutions out there as well. And so Southface, obviously, I'm proud of the work that Southface has done, but civic institutions like Emory University and Georgia Tech, Agnes Scott, tiny little Agnes Scott is, a world leader in sustainability for some of the things it's doing for its size and opportunities there. The business community, Atlanta has led the nation in a national program called the Better Buildings Challenge. And this has been going on for not quite 10 years now, but almost 10 years. So the U.S. Department of Energy issued a challenge that said, by the year 2020, we challenge communities to reduce their energy use 20%. We'll give you 10 years to do it. 20%. So Atlanta, by the way, said, we'll do that, but we're going to challenge you back because we're going to do not only energy, but we're going to do water as well.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Atlanta was the first city. Now everyone has to do water.
Ah, good for them.
And so this year, Atlanta just announced that really 2 years ahead of time, this is based on 2018 data, it met the 2020 challenge. So over 450 buildings took the challenge, representing over 100 million square feet of commercial building space. And this is every kind of building from tall skyscrapers to daycare centers, and so homeless shelters to schools. And so they surpassed the 20% savings on energy and water.
And many people are expecting West Coast cities to be there, and here it's right. Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta.
And that's, Metro Atlanta. And so I think you're right. It's the people. But Dennis, you were that early drumbeater that made many of us aware of these issues. And so I think it's a huge thank you to you to stepping out there when you were a pretty lone voice out there.
Well, thank you. I'm proud of what Southface has done. It certainly has not been a solo act. And so, and the work's not done. I remain concerned that we don't have Serenbes everywhere out there. And so we need to really double down, especially with climate, is such a pressing issue for us, but not just climate, but water. I mean, every urban area has water challenges now. And so, how do we really address these environmental challenges and create a better world? This is not a world of hardship. When you come to Serenbe, this is not hardship. This is showing how design and thoughtful construction can help address some of the serious environmental challenges that we're facing. Is
there any last points you want to make or share any projects that you're working on beyond Kendeda right now? Because the building obviously is a huge accomplishment. And I think that is a shining light and point for people to look at a better way to build. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. And they don't have to build the exact same way, but they can take small parts of it. Like even to your point about the 20,000 2x4s, of course, why aren't we all doing that?
In our building, we've certainly learned that there are always some market headwinds. This green product might cost you 10% more than a standard product, but it's going to be better for lots of reasons, often more durable, last longer, save you money in the long term, but certainly saves on energy and water and things like that. But in addition to those kind of market headwinds, there are some really, I should say needless, but I'm just going to call them stupid, policy barriers that are out there. And I see Steve I think this is resonating with Steve because I think he came across some of these policy headwinds, shall we say, in doing Serenbe that just keep us from doing smart stuff.
Yeah.
And so, the first thing we need to do is stop doing the stupid stuff.
That's right.
and then be smart and push the envelope when we have to. But let's at least get rid of the barriers out there to just doing smart design. And so, for example, it's called the Kendeda Building for Innovative Sustainable Design. This is the first commercial building in the South that's been able to use captured rainwater, treat it to some would say a level of safety maybe higher than what you might get in municipal water, and reuse that water on site. And so there's no reason for onerous policy barriers to be in the market. And so that's one reason that Kendeda was interested in doing this project, was to not just build a building. Our goal is not to build a building. Our goal is to change the conversation about how all buildings are designed and constructed. And how do we identify some of these policy barriers and get those changed. By the way, the state has been a good partner on this. And so in helping, but recognizing, well, there are some opportunities here to change some policy barriers. So the next person does not have to do this. And I'm going to flip this back to Steve, because I think there were just a few policy barriers at Serenbe that keeps a wonderful development that, celebrates design and construction from being as successful as it could be.
50% of what you see today at Serenbe was not allowed in 2000 for various reasons. In some places it was as silly as granite curbs because there was not an approved installation because they had not been installed in 30 years. To federal stormwater regulations that were absolutely the wrong thing to do. And so it was from the small to the huge. And, of course, we changed total zoning. And so this is a barrier that most developers do not have the time to fight, because they have generally already borrowed money and the interest clock is ticking. Luckily, because of my belief in Midtown, I was able to leverage my properties there so that I didn't have that burden when we started, and I could stand up and fight and say, close us down, delay us 6 months if you need to. But that's a real barrier, and some of that has changed, some are still there. And I encourage all the university students that come through here that as they get into the field, don't presume because our generation has put rules in place that they're the right rules to actually question them. And do they make common sense from what they've learned? And that's huge. And then bringing the finance community along to really understand the importance and the value of a lot of this. And those are the two big barriers facing the industry as a whole, I believe.
It's true. And, I'll take it back to climate again on energy. I mean, we have barriers that prevent solar from being installed in an economical way in some communities. And they're not federal barriers or state barriers. They're barriers, frankly, that are set up by local utilities. So, this is crazy. And so I'm a believer in the free market. And so we need to take away these barriers that don't let the free market work.
And we actually need to incentivize, because one of the most threatened things is our utility grid. And we're really not putting incentives in for regional grids. And it's one of the huge things I think we have to face as a nation.
No, I would agree.
Well, thank you so much. Dennis, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time and coming in and talking to us.
Thank you, Dennis. You were one of the real voices for all of us who were willing, and we didn't know where to turn. And you've been there pointing the way down the paths so that we could do this. And that's one of the real reasons Atlanta is a leader, because you were there pointing the way.
Well, thank you for those kind words. It's been a two-way street for sure. So many people have learned from the lessons at Serenbe, and y'all have been incredibly generous in sharing the wisdom that you've acquired here. With your competitors. And so, as well as with, those of us in the advocacy world who are trying to change some policy and change some minds. So,
well, let's keep making it happen.
That's right.
Thank you, guys. People always ask us, how do you build like Serenbe? Whether you're a city planner or developer or an eco-conscious individual with your own project, there are many steps you can take to build a more biophilic-centered life and community. Learn how to build at the Nigering Placemaking Conference this fall, September 21st through 23rd. Or come to the Biophilic Leadership Summit this spring, April 26th through 29th. Perfect for mayors, city planners, and policymakers. Visit serenbe.com/events for more information on both conferences. We hope to see you there. Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. Please rate and review the podcast and make sure to email your questions for Steve Nygren to stories@serenbe.com. You may even get to hear them on the podcast. More details about episodes and guests are available on our website, serenbestories.com.